being back promptly. I hope you were able to get what you required during the course of the last 10 or 12 minutes or so. So thanks, everybody. And of course, we're working till 2:15. So we've got 2 hours to try and get through this. And let me please repeat, if we can be as succinct in presentation as possible, that's great. But also, there's no way I want to discourage any questions, queries, comments, challenge, etc. So that's what we're about. And we'll make that work. So thanks, everybody, for getting back. And we're into academy business now, which, again, I think is a compliment to us all as directors, the development of the academies and the increased involvement and leadership of non-executive directors in chairing those and leading the discussions. And so we'll start today with finance and performance. You know, we try to turn these round a little bit at times and make sure we're not going the same order each occasion. And so we'll turn to Julie, and of course she'll be supported, I guess, by Michael. A reminder that Annex 1, of course, has the finance report at item 33 and performance report at 34. But Julie, shall I turn to you then now, please, and just ask anything you'd like to reinforce or emphasise in the very well prepared report from you as chair, please.
Okay, so I will just spend probably 5 minutes just quickly going through some bits of the report to highlight to the board. So didn't meet in August, feels a bit like we're meeting again next week in September. It's almost things, the performance and the finance things start to get crunchier as the year moves on. So we've got that meeting next week. Although we didn't meet in August, there is the July reports for finance and performance attached to the agenda, so people can see the more up-to-date positions from a number point of view from the ones that are in my chair's report. The Bradford Quality Insight Pack came to us at our July meeting. A great report, CQC based evidence on a number of areas. I think the question in F&P Academy was, why has it come to us? Not because we're not interested, but almost we could have spent our whole 2 hours going through it. I think what we've asked is Karen to come along to our next meeting and try to make it, try to interpret some of the report and say, what do we do with it and how do we make it useful? So wasn't that we didn't think it was a good report, we questioned why was it coming to us, what was the purpose, and what kind of intelligence could we garner from it. So that's down for a future agenda. We looked at the finance improvement work, talked again about the recurrent £8.5 million of savings needed to balance our financial position, £4.7 million identified. And when we move on to the finance report, we start to see the impact of that and this difference between recurrent and non-recurrent financial savings. So if we're not delivering things recurrently, what does it mean for our ongoing financial position? And I think we do as a board need to do a little bit more work on that to understand it. So you will see in the month 4 finance report, although we're forecasting a break-even position, there is this challenge about the underlying position. And like I say, I'm keen as a board, we understand what does that really mean, and what does it mean for our future years, because everything ends up with a pound note, and to continue to deliver the great improvements we're doing, we need to keep our financial position secure. We looked at the cancer improvement plan, so again focused on those areas. And again, our aspiration as a board to be in the top quartile nationally across each performance indicator by April 23. I think what becomes stark is when you start to look at the individual performance reports. So we saw the performance report for month 3 at our July meeting. We've got the performance report for month 4 attached. And what you can see is the impact, the COVID numbers that Mel talked about earlier, impact on our performance. So we saw the wave increasing in July, and we saw performance dip back again in July. So, you know, we are starting to see the impact. We're striving to improve our performance, yet all the time the COVID waves are impacting on that, and I think we need to understand that. We looked at our work on prioritising LD patients. Work started on that. We've said as a board it's important to us. We'll get some further work on what's happening and what impact is it having at future meetings. So that work has started, and like I say, we need to see what does it mean. Capital, great news about the £15 million Mel talked about. I think at F&P we'll want to understand, well, what does that mean for our performance non-elective, and what do we expect it to improve from actually getting that money in and doing that work at St Luke's. There was £6.7 million in the capital plan, and that's been used for 5 schemes. And I think there was a really pragmatic decision by the group who looked at that in the trust to say, let's support multiple schemes over multiple years instead of just focusing on the 1 year. So really good pragmatic decision made there to do that. We got an update on the Bradford Place system financial position. And we might say, why does that matter? Well, it does as part of our role in partnership. And I think especially important to us is the local authority position. So we focus a lot on the health stuff, but I think with the local authority financial position, which is really challenging, what we need to understand is what is the impact on the decisions they make about saving that money, and how does that impact onto us as health? And hopefully in my role as system chair of F&P, I can help us with some of that. So, you know, we can't see that in isolation. It will impact on what we do in health, and it will impact on what we do in the hospital. So really important we understand that. Just to finish off, we're still looking at the work we did on finance and performance effectiveness and how we do things better. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, Matthew, Saj, Laura and myself, to say how do we take the feedback from that and make things better. What we did acknowledge is our assurance role in F&P is important, and although there were some comments to do less assurance, we felt we do need to go through some of that detail in F&P and get some of that assurance. That has got to be one of our core functions, but we are keen on doing the improvement stuff better and actually looking at some of the comments that came back in the feedback and saying, how do we make that better? And we are planning a meeting with the chairs of our other academies to say, is there a piece of work we can do together as maybe once a year as academies to understand how we translate some of the improvements that are happening into a performance and financial story as well. So instead of seeing all the things in isolation, how do we make that thread across an improvement? And we think that's really important for us to do, because I think there's lots of great work happening and we can't always translate that into what does it mean. It happens and it saves money and performance improves, but what we can't do is translate that. And sometimes it don't matter, but sometimes it does. We need to be able to count it. So we're keen to do that work with the other academies. So we've got a meeting plan to do that. They're the kind of things I wanted to pull out for you. I'll look to Saj and to Michael to say, is there anything they want to add? The detailed numbers are in the report. Mel talked about some of the performance numbers already, so I won't take you through the numbers. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Julie. That's great. Yeah, so Saj and Michael, was there anything you would wish to add or emphasise to fellow directors, please?
Nothing to add from my perspective, Chair. Thank you, Julie, for the update there.
Thank you very much, Saj. And Michael, I can see you'd like to come in, I think, yeah?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Right? Yes.
Thank you. And I think Julie captured month 4 position really well from a finance perspective. I just thought it would be useful just to update the board in terms of month 5. Just to very quickly, just to highlight that we did report a break-even I&E position, and the forecast is currently break-even. But what we did see is we've tripped into a deficit position now, and we've used balance sheet flexibility to report the break-even position. So we're now starting to see a deficit position, which we will talk about at the next F&P Academy next week.
Right, thank you, Michael. That's helpful. Thank you. And Barry, could I bring you in, please, and then Subra. So Barry.
I'd just like to refer back to Julie's comments about the finance improvement plan and add my sort of string to the bow in that regard. I don't think it's just a BTHFT thing. I think it's human nature and it's general corporate nature to go for the non-recurrents because they're the easy ones. But we've heard from time to time, and again, we have to recognise COVID has disrupted things. But we've got to try and focus now on getting to the recurrents. We've heard so many times that the non-recurrent tank, so to speak, is empty. You know, we've drained that. All credit to Matthew and Michael because they keep on finding things, but the end must be nigh, and we've really got to get on now with finding recurrent changes that save us money, but without any detriment to our patients.
Thank you, Barry. Julie, do you have a view on that? Would you wish to endorse that point, or do you have a different position?
Endorse that entirely, Max, and that's my thing about us as a board needing to understand it. So what we're seeing is we're delivering non-recurrent savings by staff vacancies and things. Actually, what we want is to be fully staffed to improve the quality of services, but we're reliant on things like that to deliver cost improvements. What we want to see is the recurrent things. So how do we change things and do things better and differently that we can translate into a bottom line saving? And that's the work I'd like us to understand better as a board. So Barry's dead right. That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you, Barry, for that point, which is obviously supported. Sugra, please do come in.
Hi, thanks, Julie. You mentioned about the focus on services for people with learning disabilities, and my question sort of links around performance, but it's also around quality and safety and people as well. It was just whether we've heard anything from an assurance point of view that shows that we'll be able to demonstrate how we're performing against a new mandatory requirement for training on interacting with people with learning disabilities and autism. So that's a new sort of CQC requirement from the 1st of July, and whether we've got systems and processes lined up to be able to demonstrate how we're going to comply with that.
So thanks, Sugra. I know we're doing a lot of work on analysing our data to understand it. I'm going to pass to Saj. Sorry, Saj, I'm going to pass to you and say, are we ready to report against that new standard?
Yeah, so in terms of the waiting list analysis, I can give you an update on that, but I will need to consult with colleagues and come back to your specific questions, Sugra, around the new CQC standard. From an LD perspective, what you'll be aware of is that we approved through board, once we brought the data back, the ability to prioritise LD patients, or those identified with LD within their clinical P status that was assigned to them at the point that their surgical order was put onto the system. We've worked on a number of different fields on that. One was about increasing awareness and understanding and identifying patients with LD and being able to flag those patients upon our system. So that's been an important part of work which we've undertaken. We've made the amendments to the EPR system to allow us to do that. We've subsequently made the amendments to the reporting, which now allow us to pull off reports which highlight patients who have got an LD flag. And then what we've been able to demonstrate now as well is the fact that we are identifying those patients and pulling those patients forward within their P status. So that part of the work is all happening, and we've got good oversight of that. And in fact, we've involved the lead nurse for LD with that work. In terms of the specifics around the CQC and our interaction with LD patients, like I said, that's something we're going to need to pick up and come back to. So I haven't got a robust enough answer to that today.
Thank you very much, Saj. Sugra, thank you for staying alive to matters that are being discussed wider and bringing it into board discussions. Well done. That's a very important point. And I think was your particular focus on that mandatory training for interaction with learning disability patients? Yeah,
I mean, helpfully they have said it's appropriate to the role, isn't it? So then they're not expecting the same standard or same level of training, so it's going to be commensurate with the role that people undertake. But it talks about everybody that works in health, and the training is specifically around how we interact. So it's quite there wasn't really an appropriate juncture in terms of the agenda today to bring that up, but I thought it kind of sat with the focus on LD.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of nods around the virtual table with agreement that that's important. So thank you for raising it, Sugar, and thank you for the support. Karen, I can see you're nodding as well. So appreciate the support for picking up on that, and let's be outstanding at that level of mandatory training for those patients with additional needs. Thank you. Yeah, Barry, thank you too for your points as well. Really well put. Julie, I was just going to come back to you and say, so there were 2 or 3 things that you said a board might do to better understand. Could I just check with you, Julie? Did you mean through the Finance and Performance Academy scrutiny and inquiries, or were you proposing that perhaps board would benefit from 1 or 2 reports in those areas where you highlighted? What were you thinking? Yeah.
Matthew and I had a bit of a conversation in August when he was updating me on the financial position about maybe doing something in board development about the underlying financial position and what that means and why it's important. You know, why we often say, well, we're forecasting break even, so we almost just put it aside. We're moving, although COVID is still there, we're moving back to where there's a focus on our finances, and I think we do as a board need to understand it. So talking about development, Max.
Thank you. No, that's ideal, Julie. And again, I see no objections around the table. I can see some nods. And so, no, thank you for that. So just wanted to be clear about your proposal there. And Mel and I can pick up on that. We'll make sure that there's time given to that. So thank you. Thank you very much, Julie. Okay. In the absence of any further questions, are we satisfied with the work of the Finance and Performance Academy and Julie's helpful summary? And thank you, everybody, for questions and comments. Okay. And as I say, I do commend reports 33 and 34 to you to read. They're very well prepared. It struck me as well during our short break there, I did want to say thank you to Katie, who's obviously doing a great job with slides for different people. So, Katie, it often goes unmentioned, and your support for helping us as a board get into things is great. So, thank you, Katie, for everything you're doing. That's terrific. Saj, shall I turn to you then for paper 12? This is the paper to note. It is about the EPRR standards, of which there are 64 and 7 are partially complete. What would you wish to bring to our attention, please, in noting that document?
Thank you. Thanks, Max. There's items to note, and I will need permission or delegated authority for us to be able to take the final sign-off of the submission against the core standards through to F&P Academy ahead of the deadline on the 26th of October. So just by way of background, the Civil Contingencies Acts 2004 and the Contingency Planning Regulation 2005 and the Health and Care Act basically place statutory requirements on NHS providers of care to be able to demonstrate their compliance with the EPRR framework. And we do that through an annual submission process whereby the board needs to satisfy itself that we are compliant with the standards. During 2021, compliance was checked against 48 of the 64 core standards, and that was in recognition of the fact that we had COVID and we were dealing with COVID through the prior year, and therefore there was a bit more of a light touch approach. But even so, the importance is such that we were still required to submit our self-compliance, and again, board delegated authority to F&P committee for the final sign-off of that, and we were able to demonstrate substantial compliance for the previous year. This year, so 2022, we've now gone back to the full 64 standards, core standards, and we're being asked to demonstrate our compliance against those. At the same time, what we found is that there are a number of new and reworded standards and questions that have come along as a result of learning from recent events, and whether that be Grenfell, the Manchester Arena bombing, or indeed the outputs from COVID as well. So one of the examples to highlight to colleagues here is that Previously, there would have been a reference that there's a designated non-executive director who's responsible for EPRR. And the latest wording is that actually it's not just one designated non-exec director, it's incumbent upon all of us to assure ourselves that the EPRR requirements are being met, and that just basically reflects for me the fact that it's the whole board's responsibility. I am the accountable officer for the organisation and the designated exec on behalf of Mel with delegated authority for it, but actually there's a real requirement emphasis that this is a whole board sign off and approach. The other main areas of change in the core standards is around training and exercise domains and the duty to maintain plans. The detail of that, which are contained within the appendices that are included. So what the self-assessment really looks at, and why NHS England come to us, is in fact they're seeking assurance that we've got two things in place. One is that we're prepared to respond to an emergency, and the second is that we've got resilience in order to be able to continue to provide safe patient care. So that's the aim of what NHS England are looking for. So you've got an option of being able to declare full compliance, substantial compliance, partial compliance, or non-compliance. Having undertaken our own self-assessment, we believe we're able to report a substantially compliant position, and will be substantially compliant by the 28th of October, which is, as I say, the deadline for submission of that compliance. The minimum requirement for us to get to a substantial compliance is that we achieve 57 of the 64 standards, and we're at that level. And in fact, as the paper recognises, we believe we'll be able to achieve further compliance on 2 more standards. So we'll be at 59 of the 64 standards by the time we end up submitting this. So the first thing for board to note is that our position of submitting a substantially compliant position, not a full compliant position. That is what I would expect, and the reason that's what I would expect is given the fact that there's quite a number of new standards within there. So it'd be hard push for us to be able to say we're demonstrating full compliance. So for example, one of the big pushes now to have full site evacuation plan. And this comes on the back of things like the RAC, the concrete issues that a number of health organisations are seeing. And given some of the new standards, it's really difficult for us to be able to do a self-assessment and say we're fully compliant in that. And that's why we presenting a substantial position. On page 2, you'll see a table which highlights the 10 domains against which we're measured. So the 64 standards sit within 10 domains. And what that highlights for you is that we are compliant against 57 of those 64 and partially compliant against 7 of the 64. But like I say, 2 of those standards will become substantially compliant by the submission date. In addition to that, as part of the core standard submission, each year we're required to do a deep dive into specific areas. So, for instance, last year we were deep diving into the provision of oxygen and the oxygen supply. This year it's on the focus is on evacuation and shelter, and that is, like I said, due to the heightened risk associated with RAC. And the feedback and the outputs, what happens is that that's used to then determine and strengthen the standards in future years. And our self-assessment against those standards is that we're fully compliant against 7 of the 13 standards there, but further work to be done on 6 of those standards. And again, we'll work through with our within both internally but also regional colleagues in terms of getting to a position of compliance. There is a West Yorkshire ICB group pulled together which will look to peer assess and review each of our submissions and the work that we're doing. The other area that I wanted to highlight is the work that we've been doing apart from compliance with the core standard in terms of over the last 12 months. So our ability to respond to and learn from incidents. So we did enact a business continuity plan, which was on the back of a loss of electrical supply in A&E. And immediately after that, we do take learnings and we do a hot debrief and we pull out any learnings from there. And obviously, if that, which we had declared that as an SI, any of the subsequent learning that comes out of that, that will help us determine our and update our action plans. We've run a second exercise relating to piped oxygen. We'd done one initially, but we've done another one, which was a desktop exercise with ITU, and on the back of that, being able to update our action cards in the event of an oxygen failure. There's a big emphasis now on training, so principle of health command training is in place, and we're going through that training. So on-call managers and on-call directors are going through this training, and there's a big focus on this in terms of as a result of the learning from incidents such as I said, Grenfell and the Manchester arena bombing, and it's been agreed that all strategic health commanders, certainly those that are on gold command, are mandated to undertake this, and that's going to happen by the 30th of this month. So a number of my colleagues have already been through that training, and those colleagues that haven't as yet are booked on by the 30th, which is great. In addition to that, we ran 3 sessions of joint decision model training as well, and that was with colleagues from Nhsi. And where we managed to get 27 staff through that as well in terms of our response during an incident. On top of that, we've got on-call manager and exec feedback sessions, and this is just a quarterly session we've set up where colleagues can come back together and feedback to each other as to how on-call's been, whether there's any issues they wanted to flag, and we look at that. And then as an added assurance, there's been 2 internal audit inspections that have been carried out, both in January 2022. One on EPRR, which provided the trust with significant assurance, and the other one was on business and IT continuity, which again provided the organisation with significant assurance. So I'm going to leave it there, but just highlight the specific asks within the recommendation section. So first one is around noting the work that's been undertaken over the course of the last 12 months, to know our substantial compliance against the 64 core standards, and the work that we're doing on the deep dive, which is around evacuation and shelter arrangements, and to give us the delegated authority for final sign-off for the submission to rest with the F&P committee on the 26th, which is taking place on the 26th of October, ahead of the deadline on the 28th of October. As I say, the appendices are included there for your information. I wasn't intending on running through the detail of those.
No, colleagues have had the chance to read those. Thank you very much, Saj. That was very detailed. Thank you. Recommendations in 3 parts. 2 are simply to note, please, the significant work and the substantial compliance. And we're asked as a decision, will we delegate authority for final sign-off of the submission to the Finance and Performance Committee under Julie's chair, of course, on the 26th of October. So could I ask whether does anybody need any further information, comments or questions before I propose that we have noted and that we do delegate authority? And if there's no further questions, can I assume that there's full support for the delegated authority? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Saj. That's great. And yeah, no, I appreciate the detail there. And it's a very important document. Very important document, actually, given the current circumstances. So thank you. Yeah, great stuff. Okay, let's get into quality and patient safety now then, please. And we'll turn to Janet. Thank you for the preparation of the chair's report from our July Academy meeting. But again, Janet, would you wish to bring anything in particular to our attention about the work of the Quality and Patient Safety Academy, please?
I will do, and I'll be as brief as colleagues allow. So we have the paperwork, and you also have the approved minutes from the June meeting. Similarly, we met in July. There was no meeting in August, so it does seem a little while ago. Just to note that we welcome Jill Paxson to the Academy, who's the Associate Director of Quality and Nursing at Bradford District and Craven Healthcare Partnership, which quite a title, and that's in line with our new partnership arrangements. And she was very welcome, and it seemed a positive meeting for her. So I'm just going to draw out a couple of items in particular. We had a suite of papers regarding quality oversight and assurance, serious incidents and high-level operational risks. There's a few highlighted on the paper regarding hysteroscopy, which also was presented at Finance and Performance Academy, and we felt reassured back from Matthew that that had been addressed. There was some Cerner and maternity EPR concerns and risks, and we note that we'll probably get an update later in Sarah's presentation. At the time, it related to discharging of women and babies, and we were assured because there was a mitigation in place, which wasn't ideal, but it was a pragmatic solution. So that was good to have that in place. We noted that there were risks around staffing per se, around a number of areas, and that remains high and it remains in focus. So as an academy, we're pleased that we're regularly seeing how that is progressing. We also discussed a really encouraging discussion and a challenging discussion around the benefits of opportunity to learn from deaths and how important that has been. And we had a really encouraging presentation around the nature and around palliative care that's been delivered in an acute setting, and how well that had been received from families of loved ones who were going through a difficult journey. So that was encouraging to note the quality of that provision, and to learning from some very structured judgment reviews. And Ray presented that, and it was our first opportunity to learn as a trust of how we could improve and retain what was working well. We had a detailed report from Maternity and Neonatal presentation, and the Academy praised Sarah providing that for us, and the openness of the challenges that had been experienced, and of course the praise where progress has been made and the continuous progress that is to be made. And the last thing I'm really particularly going to draw out is a very open and frank discussion about how the Academy operationalizes its current format. Is a 3-hour-long meeting. It is a very, very crowded agenda. And following the June half-away day of Academy members and subsequent meetings led by Judith and Laura, at the next Academy, there'll be a proposal for a new structure, and that new structure will enable us to spend different meetings to particularly focus on assurance and triangulation and ask those high-level questions, and then at a different meeting in particular focus on learning and improvement, and as well as to get regular feedbacks from our clinical service units, and in additional having an annual quality and patient safety reviewer. So we understood from the attendees that it was a real challenge academy because of its breadth and the amount of detail that's shared, and sometimes using different formats we weren't perhaps paying enough attention to assurance and too much to learning, and vice versa. So that's more learning that will be brought back, and we can explain further how that may unfold. I'm going to stop there in really to do with the pressures of times, but any questions for myself and Ray and or Karen and others, welcome.
Thank you very much, Janet. That's great to hear of the development regarding assurance learning and improvement. And can I thank you and those colleagues involved in the mortality review improvement work. Learning from deaths is something I'm passionately believe in. And I'm delighted to see the very positive comments in there about additional wider information and good clinical engagement. So yeah, great stuff. Thank you very much, both you and Ray. So shall I just turn and ask whether are there any queries or questions arising from quality and patient safety? John helpfully early in the meeting did talk about some of the risks, which I think some of those are held within quality and patient safety, increasing risks, etc. But hopefully we'll pick up on those as we get towards the end of the business of the meeting, when we review where we are with BAF and high-level risks. Shall I just check whether if there's nothing further to add? Janet, is there anything, I don't mean to test on you here at all, but is there anything you would wish to say about those risks held by quality and patient safety?
The risks, they're appropriate to the academy, and they span other academies too. So there is a sense that they're getting the right level of scrutiny from different dimensions. I think we did have some conversations of some of the risks legitimately are have increased over time, particularly around workforce and staffing, and from the academy's point of view, you know, we should have an appropriate risk assessment, so we keep our eye. We don't sort of we keep our eye on these real risks, because some of them are seriously challenging, particularly around the pipeline. But there's some very operational, some to do with equipment that we're enduring, but still a risk. There were different magnitudes of scale.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jenny. You're vigilant to them within the academy. Thank you. That's extremely helpful. Thanks. If there's no further comments or questions, shall I move on to the other quality items? And it's good, obviously, that we've got Janet here. Karen or Ray, is there anything you would wish to comment on regarding the work of the academy? I appreciate we didn't have August academies, but is there anything you'd want to bring to our attention? Perhaps not. No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, let's get on with the business of that's under quality and patient safety. So shall we go to item 14 then? Thank you very much, Janet. Shall we go to item 14 and note the CQC inspection report that has been provided by Karen, and a very helpful action plan which shows the 4 should-dos. We're simply being asked to note, of course, as board, but Karen, shall I turn to you and ask whether there's anything you wanted to emphasise in relation to that, please?
Thank you. So, as Mel already alluded to, this was one of we were part of the system-wide review of emergency services in West Yorkshire, of which there is an overarching report that's very brief, actually. But each individual organisation that was assessed was also issued with a report. Where this report differs from others that you would see is that it says it's inspected but not rated. So under the remit that they inspected, they did not rate, but they did indicate that they wouldn't expect our rating to have changed based on the inspection. And our urgent and emergency services are currently rated as good. When you read the report, at first I was a bit disappointed, but then actually when you read it, considering where we are, you know, coming out of the pandemic with the staffing challenges we have, it is actually a very, very good report. And that was the feedback on the day from the clinicians who inspected and the CQC inspectors as well. There were a couple of areas where they did pick us up. Those are covered in the action plan and are all in the process of being actioned. So firstly is around an area for mental health patients. We don't have a dedicated mental health area. We have a cubicle that we often use, and we have a dementia-friendly cubicle in A&E, but no specific mental health cubicle for a number of reasons. And we could articulate that to the inspectors, but they still felt that we needed to have some sort of secure mental health cubicle arrangement. I don't think this would be used for every single mental health patient that comes into the department because of the volumes that do sadly come through. But for some of the very sickest or that are most at risk of themselves or others, it will be a great asset to the department. We've successfully been awarded funding, some national funding from mental health to cover that off, and the work is being planned. And we're actually consulting with the Care Trust around the plans for that, because they're the experts in mental health, to give us some additional assurance on that. They picked up that we weren't always identifying and starting treatment for sepsis in a timely manner. I think when we talked to people, there was some probably clumsy comments around this as well that made the inspectors go and look a bit harder, and they're quite right, they picked up that there were some delays. One of the issues around this was that Claire Nander, who is our sepsis nurse, had been on maternity leave for 12 months. and it shouldn't be reliant on one person. But actually, the A&E team did look at Claire Nander as an expert in this field. So since then, the team has started to make improvements. Claire Nander is back, but also they've identified consultants and nurse leads within A&E for sepsis, which again is an improvement. The quality of patient records and observations, this wasn't that the observations were not getting done, but what staff were doing because they were busy was scribbling the observations down and adding them to the document afterwards. So they were batching when they sat down as a computer to put the observations on. And also things like intentional rounding, were checking on patients every hour. That wasn't being documented. But again, the CQC said they could see it being done and observed it being done. It was that they weren't documenting that it was being done. And then the final point is a bit of a catch-all for everybody, really. And I don't think it's something that's within our own gift to fully sort, because it really is a system thing. And this is around the flow of emergency patients, full stop. So that whether that be through GP services, minor injuries units, to patients' own pharmacies, self-care, to make sure that the patients are in the right place for what they need. So overall, a very positive report. The team were a little disappointed because they did put in lots of exemplary practice that didn't get included. But I think if I'm being honest, they probably just ran out of time to put those additional bits in, rather than because they did acknowledge the practice that was going on there. So I'll pause and take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Cameron. I think you have, Sugra and I had an earlier discussion actually about the designated mental health space, and I think I heard from you that we will be delivering that. Yeah. Sugra, would you like to come in? Yeah, thank you, Karen. Yeah, Sugra, please do come in.
Yeah, just on that, I think starting off by saying, if you look at some of the other reports that came out over the summer, this report compares very favourably. And given the exceptional challenges that everybody's facing, I think it's a really positive report. I think there's always bits in there that you think, I wish that hadn't have happened on the day, and there's a lot of emphasis, as you'd quite rightly expect, around staffing, etc. But that's a kind of national challenge anyway. There's a couple of things just from the action plan, and I appreciate this is probably a summary and there's a lot of work already gone on behind the scenes. One was around the oversight and treatment of sepsis. So the action points quite rightly do look at, where are the indicators, what are you doing about that? My question on that one was about the treatment. So in the report, it mentions perhaps one instance where there's been an issue with accessibility or timely access to antibiotics. And I wondered if we could hear a little bit more about the actions that might have been taken to respond to that. Do you want me to ask the next one?
Yes, if you say them both, so good. Yeah.
So around people presenting with mental health crises, the report acknowledged that, we've already heard that there's plans in place to look at a specific designated space. In the interim, the staff, as is reflected in the report, mentioned the standard cubicle where potential risk could be removed, so potential ligature points, or furniture or equipment that might be of concern. But there's also mention made in passing that in practice this might be problematic, particularly when it's busy. So it's just what we can do between now and that designated space becoming operational to make sure that people receiving care consistently in a safe space. Are there any action points? Are there any checklists that you're going to implement? What else has happened about that issue?
Very fair queries. Thank you, Sugra. Yeah. Karen, are you okay about dealing with those two?
Yeah, of course. I'll say the mental health cubicle first. So there was a lot of heated debate on this with both Sarah Turner, our mental health lead, and the A&E staff. And it was a contentious recommendation, if I'm being honest. So all of our cubicles and environments have been assessed for ligature points and things like that, and we've got collapsible rails. So we don't strip ligature points out because technically we don't have them. If somebody is at severe risk of harming themselves, we will have somebody with them. And when you're in our main area, there are 2 cubicles to the left, which we use for higher observation in the main area, which is where we tend to put people that are presented with mental health problems. I think there was a sweeping assumption made that anybody that attends with a mental health problem needs to go into a specialised environment, and that's not correct. And I think the other worry was there's a lot documented about how mental health cubicles work, and usually it's about having an access point for staff so that they've all got a door at the back or a second exit. So we have looked in the past at making another area into this, a more secure area, but we could only have one exit out of it. So that wasn't okay. But where we have the cubicles designated now, there is a door on either side so staff can easily get in and out. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but what I would say is, having worked in that department, having observed how people are cared for, I am confident that they manage risk extremely well. And I do not believe this is posing an immediate risk to us, but it is a recommendation and it would be best practice to have this facility, and we've not now secured the funding to make that happen. Is that helpful, Sugra?
It is. What I have experienced in the past is just within the action plan, where we can see the eventual sort of go live date, if you like, for the solution is several months hence. We sometimes had a column which has said measures to be taken in the interim, so that gives an extra level of assurance. I appreciate this is an internal document anyway, but that's just some feedback to share, because like you say, some of these measures that are already in place, such as the fact that you normally have a HCA assigned, and actually I agree with you, there's a sweeping generalisation here that anybody presenting with a mental health issue or concern is automatically going to also have an associated suicide risk or harm risk, to pose harm risk to themselves or to others, and that's not necessarily the case, obviously. So I think, yeah, it was just to cover that off, really, to say, are you confident? Yeah. And it sounds like you are.
Yeah, we also have a monthly meeting called Moving to Outstanding, which is our sort of operational meeting for all things CQC. So the meeting immediately after the CQC visit in April, we picked up on those things. The team presented on those things and said what they were doing about it. That then allowed us to get the bids in for the capital monies and things. So the reason the date is in the future is because it's a capital build that's needed. But we've now secured that money and it should be finished in year. But we did have immediate conversations around any mitigation of risk that we needed to do. On your point in relation to sepsis, again, this is something that we're looking at trust-wide. The sepsis dashboard has been reinvigorated and re-looked at. Claire Nanda is now back, and I agree, you know, we should be dependent on one person. And there is a QI work stream, which Leanne Elliott is very closely involved in, looking at sepsis. That reports through to the patient safety committees and through to quality and safety. And at Quality and Safety Academy, I think it's every 3 months or at least twice a year that we talk about sepsis and bring it formally back.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Go on, Sugna. Yeah.
I was just going to say, will it address specifically the issue around timely access to antibiotics?
Yes, all of those things. So it's the complete sepsis 6 bundle, but I can see Ray's got his hand up, so I bet he's going to come in on this.
Thank you.
And a perfectly reasonable assurance check, Sugna. Thank you. Yes. Ray, shall I bring you in? I know Mark has been waiting as well, but just in case it's on this point, yeah.
Yes, it is, Max. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to emphasise, there's sort of a bit of a difference between what we do in terms of recording that we've noted sepsis and actually how we treat sepsis and whether the patients have any impact on their healthcare because of it. We know that we don't always flag sepsis as we should do on EPR, but we also know that in terms of treating sepsis, we actually do very well. So we've done specific audits looking at when patients actually receive treatment for sepsis, So, and we do very well on that. So the recording is one thing, but the more important thing is, are the patients treated and are they coming to any harm in the result? And all the evidence that we have suggests, no, we actually give patients very timely treatment. It's more the recording of it that we don't do as well.
Thank you. That's helpful additional detail. Thank you very much, Ray. And Mark, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Please do come in. Yeah.
No, thank you, Chair, and hi, everybody. Just really briefly, I don't want to take up any more time on this, but just the detail behind what we're going to do. Karen's already alluded to the funding. Just to be clear, we've got £70,000 mental health funding, and that now, as Karen alluded to again, is being dealt with by a multidisciplinary team with Simon Kirk leading it in ED, with estates, with Bradford Care Trust as the specialists, and with a range of other people. And the actual plan is we'll create a specific bespoke mental health area in terms of a cubicle, but also there's some work that's going to be done around some resource cubicles that are part of that £70,000. And likewise, because we know mental health patients are generally longer stay, we did want to take care of food and nutrition. So there's something being just done around an area of the kitchen to facilitate and deal with that. So 3 strands to the £70,000. So effectively, that's what will be done now once we've approved precisely what we're going to do for some of the reasons you've mentioned, Sugar, as well. So we want to make sure we get it right. So that's the detail behind it.
That's terrific, Mark. That was great additional detail. Thank you very much indeed. And how encouraging. Personalised care. It's excellent. Delighted to hear of that. So yeah, that was good detail. Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Thank you, Karen, for the great discussions actually there about the inspection, and the action plan was extremely helpful. It was tabled, so thank you. Shall we turn to maternity? Sarah, I realise you will have been waiting. I apologise for that. We've just run over a little bit with some excellent discussions, to be fair, on important matters today. There was a lot of strategy items. So I'll turn to Karen and Sarah. Maybe might I suggest, we've all got the papers, of course. If I might suggest as succinct a briefing as possible, but of course I don't want to discourage any detail and reflection on those important matters that are going to be raised. I realise as well that we just need to remind ourselves of the Ockenden feedback work. So I'll turn to Karen and Sarah and ask them to lead us through it, but as to the point as possible. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I'll hand over to Sarah more or less straight away, but just to say that there are a suite of documents there. What we've tried to do, which we promised we'd do, is pull out the salient points with a focus on 3 things really this month. And we've put a presentation together that pulls those out for us. So one is the increase in stillbirths in August. The second is the external visits that we've had, which are the Ockenden visit and the maternity improvement visit. And the third is just a bit of a focus on risk, to look at what our top risks are with the CQC. We are mindful that the inspector, we believe, is going to call in the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks. And that's why it's just timely just to remember those risks that we've got. So I'll hand over to Sarah, and if Katie could share the presentation, please.
Thanks, Karen. And can I say, Karen, I really like the visual format that was used for learning. So yeah, that was they're excellent. So Sarah, hello, and over to you.
Hello. Hi, thank you. So as Karen said, yeah, we'll take the papers as read. The Ockenden feedback presentation is attached in the paper bundle, and I'm not going to go through that specifically. I think I did give a narrative update to board after the after we had the visit. That the accompanying documentation just summarises what the team found, which reflects previous conversations. So if we could just go on to the next page, please. Thank you. So July headlines, Ockenden recommendation for paper 2 for the second report has quite a controversial comment in it regarding the use of newly qualified midwives and whether or not they should go into community settings within the first 12 months of practice. Now that's something that we do at BTHFT already. Our band 5s go out quite early doors and have a very robust preceptorship package in place and the relevant support. So we were actually really pleased when we had a national update that enables us now to make that individual decision as to where we place our midwives. So that was the first thing just to pull out of July. The second thing just to note in July of importance was that we unfortunately had an incomplete data submission to the Yorkshire and Humber dashboard, maternity dashboard, and this was for the second time running. Again, it's linked very much to our post-Cerner Go Live processes. The regional team are very supportive of our approach there, and what they have agreed to do is as soon as we have got the data, they will retrospectively add it, so we will be able to see it at some point in the future. We continue to work really hard with both BI and our digital colleagues. We've now got a digital midwife who's in place. She's working hard to improve data quality. We've also appointed a couple of data quality midwives to do the education and the training, and what we're aiming to do at the moment is try and resolve data issues as quickly as possible after they've occurred, rather than leaving them until we're pulling the data at the end of the month. Next page, please. So August headlines, as Karen's alluded to, we did have unfortunately an increased number of stillbirths. I'm not going to dwell on that now. I'll bring that in further in the presentation. One thing the board just needs to be aware of is, as part of this maternity incentive scheme, Safety Action 1, regarding the presentation of the quarterly perinatal mortality review tool report to board. You've seen this on several occasions before. That's attached in the paper bundle. What I just wanted to bring out was in the main, we're doing very well with that standard, with good compliance. We've just had to put a query into NHS resolution this month because unfortunately we've got a target that all deaths have to be reported within a 7-day period. Unfortunately, there was a stillbirth that was also related to a maternal death that you'll be aware of from previous meetings. It was quite a complex situation. Unfortunately, that baby was recorded as a live birth, not a stillbirth, and what that ended up doing was delaying our ability to actually escalate that and to log it on PMRT. So because we have a very good track record with them, other than that we are 100% compliant, we have asked for NHS Res to just consider that as mitigating circumstances. So we're just waiting a final verdict from them. The other thing that happened to us in August and was very positive was we had our NHSI Maternity Safety Support Programme review. So two of the team, Sasha, who is Jackie Duncan-Bent's direct deputy, and our support, our allocated support officer, came to visit us in person. We've done a lot of this programme virtually, but they actually came to have a walk around the area and just to make sure that everything was okay, with a view to exiting us from the programme. The support team were really impressed and very highly complimentary of the progress that we've made over the last 2 years. Really, they felt it was very visible, and that the enthusiasm and the engagement from the staff was palpable. We were also very much praised on the fact that quite a lot of the things that we put in place actually are pretty exemplary practice, and we've been asked if we can share that with some other organisations who are struggling with a few things at the moment, which of course we will do. So they're in the opinion that we can be exited from the programme now, following board sign-off of a sustainability plan. So what we're in the process of doing at the moment is our current maternity improvement plan, which includes the CQC actions. We are just looking at how we can demonstrate to board and obviously to NHSI that we've also got a plan in place to sustain the actions that we've already completed or those that are ongoing. So that will be presented to November board, and I suggest that I do that as one of the key feedback discussions. The commitment from Trust Board will be very much as part of the sustainability plan, that as you have done for the last certainly 2-3 years, that you just continue to nurture this strong relationship that we've developed between the maternity service and board level. And that we're very much championing both the local and the national maternity agendas. Next page, please. So I'll just do a quick focus on the 6 stillbirths that we had in August. Now, as you've probably been aware from previous meetings, we've done very well. We had a reduction last year overall, and this year so far we've just been steadily away without too much concern. Unfortunately, we did have a spike in stillbirths in August, which triggered our agreed internal escalation process, which comprises of us contacting Leanne as the Deputy Medical Director and Karen, and having a bit of a face-to-face discussion about all of the cases, and to actually look at, have we got any emerging themes, trends, or any problems that we're concerned about. So that took place. To assure board, all the cases have had an immediate clinical review to identify any immediate learning and any resulting actions from that. All of the cases, of which there were one that met the HSIB criteria, were referred with parental consent. There was one case that didn't meet the HSIB criteria, but after our initial investigation, we did take that one to SEG, and also that was then referred to QOC, and it's been agreed that that's going to be investigated as a level 1, because we did identify that there were some missed opportunities to have done things differently in that particular case. So we looked at everything individually, as we always do. All of those babies deserve that attention and review of their care. Then in addition to that, we've done a tabletop thematic review of all the cases that within that cluster to look for any themes and trends. I've attached in the paper bundle Appendix 2, which was the immediate learning that was shared with staff, and I think that's quite useful for board to see, because it's very comprehensive. Yeah, it's very comprehensive, and I think you said, Max, a very visual way for staff to actually see what's happened and actually what they can do to try and prevent things from happening in the future. So as I've said as well, the Quality and Safety Midwife and the Clinical Director have met with the key people to discuss this. Next slide, please. So the focus on stillbirths, obviously the women and the families all had the initial contact with the specialist bereavement midwife team, and they continue to receive regular contact and support as they need it. All of the cases commenced the PMRT process I've just described, where we've missed the one case. This wasn't within that cluster. And that's done as a minimum. The parents are informed, and they're asked to contribute at that point, to contribute any questions or feedback that they want us to include in the review. The women whose cases have been referred to HSIB or for further investigation have also got the support of a member of the Maternity Quality and Safety team. And again, that's another opportunity for them to raise any individual concerns about the care that they've received, either during the pregnancy or during the birth process. Duty of candour has been done for all of the cases that met the HSIB criteria and for any that would meet the threshold for an internal SI. Also importantly, the staff obviously are the second victims in these cases, so they've very much been supported by the Maternity Quality and Safety team. They've also been signposted to a member of the Professional Midwifery Advocate team, or to other support, whether they needed psychological support or to be signposted to occupational health. And we do that as standard. Next slide, please. So again, the focus on stillbirth, if you look at Appendix 1, that is available to closed board, and that is a detail of the cases, so I'm not going to go into those here. However, just to summarise, 5 of the 6 cases, these are some of the commonalities or some of the themes that we thought might be emerging. 5 of the 6 cases were mothers in their first substantive pregnancy. We're not sure how significant that is, and I think what we need to do is actually look at all of the stillbirths so far this year and see whether have we got more first-time mums that are losing their babies than second or third, for example. So that's a piece that's just something that was flagged. Reassuringly, there were no language barriers in any of the cases. It's something that comes through as a theme from HSIB on several occasions regarding the use of interpreting services, but there was nothing that let us down in that case. One case that met the HSIB criteria, that was the term baby, and the reason it met the criteria to be referred externally was because the mum was having some contractions at the time of her admission to the unit and when the death was first diagnosed. And as I've said already, one case was investigated as a level 1 once we decided that there were definitely some missed opportunities which we could have done something differently, that was identified at that initial clinical review. 4 out of the 5 babies had a birth weight on or just above or below the 3rd centile, which is pretty small. But actually, just to clarify that a little bit more, of those 4 of the 4 babies, 3 of those babies we already knew about and were on an appropriate pathway. So although they still although they still had a demise, the appropriate interventions were put in at the right stages of pregnancy to monitor that growth. Next slide, please. So that was that on stillbirths. The other thing that we thought of, as Karen said, we're expecting the CQC to come at any point in the next few weeks or months, and that's as part of the national CQC focus on maternity services. So what we thought it would be quite a timely opportunity just to appraise board of the 5 top risks that we've got at the moment within the maternity. So as a list, we have midwifery staffing, breastfeeding initiation rates, obstetric staffing, a lack of lone worker devices, and Cerner, as I think Paul mentioned earlier on in the meeting today, we're still having some multiple issues regarding Cerner post go live. So just to break those down really quickly, if we move on to the next slide, please. Midwifery staffing, there's just a little bit of detail about what we're doing about it. So we acknowledge that it's a problem. It's regularly updated on the risk register. We've got new starters that are due to come in October. We had a little bit of bad news yesterday in that the full 22 are not all in a position to start in October now for various reasons. And there's a couple of pregnancies in there, and there's a few people that have failed to meet either the academic or the clinical hours. So they will start with us, but not in October. So fortunately, we haven't lost anybody to any other organisations, which we're very pleased about, and we will continue to support these new starters as and when they reach their ability to get their PIN number and commence with us. We have a further 16 full-time midwifery vacancy, full-time equivalent vacancy. We have a rolling advert out for 5s and 6s, and we're continuing to recruit to other innovations such as the legacy midwife to support newly qualified and new starters. And as I said before, we've also got a newly appointed digital midwife. We're also involved in the trust recruitment, the wider recruitment plans that are taking part in October. And we are also recruiting international midwives. And this has been a bit of a slow burner, but we're just starting to pick up some traction. We've offered to one, we're about to interview another, and we've just been made aware that we've actually got 10 more CVs to shortlist. And I've been informed by the person leading on this that actually all of those people are subject to an interview now. Next slide, please. Breastfeeding initiation rates. So breastfeeding, what are we doing about it at the moment? We have an absolutely amazing infant feeding coordinator who is one of the most passionate people that you'll ever meet in your life. And she has now got a small team around her of midwives who've got special interest in infant feeding, who are actual clinical experts in the clinical areas, and able to, what we're hoping is that we're doing a bit of a cascade of good practice, breeding good practice, in addition to, I'm really sorry, there's a fire alarm test abduction that's just going off now. Are you happy for me to continue with the background noise?
Of course, Sarah. I assume you're not supposed to leave where you are.
I'll leave the team to do that if you're okay with that. They've alerted me to it, so they're on it. Right. Okay.
Sorry, Sarah. I better just check. You know that this is a test, do you?
I do. Yes, I've got a little piece of paper that was just put in front of me that it's a test.
Thank you. Okay.
Just to assure there's nothing happening.
No.
So we also have infant feeding clinics. Ad hoc intensive support for acute admissions. There's a shared focus on guidance for staff regarding documentation. We're working closely with the NCT and breastfeeding buddies, and we are also liaising with Health for All, who also have some paid volunteers with honorary contracts. So there's a lot of work being done within infant feeding. Next slide, please. So obstetric staffing, again, we've got a number of posts out to recruitment at the moment. We've just appointed another locum consultant, and we've got further interviews planned. Next slide, please. The the lone worker device risk is actually more than a maternity risk. This is a trust-wide issue. It has been escalated to the exec team via the risk register, and I think it's subject to quite a lot of discussion at the moment. We have got some mitigation in place for the staff to make sure that they do feel that they are feeling supported and safe. A number of them do have the devices. A number of them are also using smartphones to be able to track where they are and to be able to alert to assistance if they need to. And then the final risk there on the next slide. I'm really sorry. Do you want me to pause now? I think it's getting a little bit noisy. I'm just conscious for feedback and things.
It's not noisy for us, Sarah.
Are you okay?
All right. If you're in a safe place, it's not noisy for us.
Place. Yeah, I'm definitely in a safe place. Okay,
yeah.
So yeah, the Cerner risks. We do have a number of issues that are still rumbling on. They're still very much a focus and are being addressed by our digital colleagues. But there's nothing that's got a quick resolve at the moment. So whilst we've got mitigation in place, I think one of the things that Janet referred to earlier on was about the discharge report. That hasn't resolved yet, unfortunately. However, all that mitigation remains in place, with it being subject to checking by the community managers on a daily basis. And we're backing that up with datexers and definitely seeing a definite reduction in the amount of mums and babies that were missing the first day visits on. So it is working, but it still isn't sustainable in the long term. So we continue to work towards a longer term solution. Another one of the key things that we're still having challenges with is the implementation of the patient portal, which allows women to have access and ownership of their personalised care plans. And that very much sits in as an Ockenden recommendation. And again, we're working very closely with IT colleagues to actually look at what the solutions that are available to us at the moment. And we've got a conference call with an organisation who are trialling something, who are also on Cerner, who are trialling a new method at the moment to actually find out, is that working for them, and is that something that we are likely to pick up here at Bradford. So that was a little bit of a whistle stop. You have those in your slide pack. So for those board members who may be questioned by the CQC about what the top 5 risks are, then there's a little aid memoir there. If they change radically in the next few weeks, I'll also share that with board as well. So I'm happy to take any questions. And apologies again, there was a little bit distracted because I got so much noise going on in the background.
I don't know, Sarah, I don't know if it did for others, but it didn't come across for me. So it was a great presentation. Thank you. Yeah, it was very clear. And of course, the provision of the information that we get is hugely important. And I'm pleased that you note the board support and interest in this work, and of course that includes our maternity champion and other colleagues who are supporting that. So thanks everybody. Is there anything we need to think? Are we content to note the Ockenden feedback slides, or did we need to focus on them in any particular way, Karen or Sarah?
I think they were just included just for noting, because I did refer to them in the last board meeting. I'm happy to go through any key points on there if anybody's picked anything up.
No,
again, it was a very complimentary visit. It was a very supportive and complimentary visit, Max. And again, we got a lot of good feedback and a lot of comments about, again, some very exemplary initiatives and things that we've implemented here that the people were happy for us to share. Particularly of note, the fact that things like our safety champion model we're looking to roll out across the wider organisation, which was very positively received by the team, and I think that if we do that well, I think we may become a national leader in that one. I think there'll be other organisations that are encouraged to do the same.
Sarah, I was trying to do my job properly, not skip past things that might have required a bit of attention, but I don't think so. I think we have seen the slides and we understand the nature of the feedback. Karen, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, so it's just to say the one thing that we do need to carefully minute as a board. So when we were visited by Sasha from the National Maternity Improvement Team, They asked for us to make sure an up-to-date action plan went to board, which we've got that. We get that at every board and every committee meeting. But they particularly wanted us to note and get the support of board to say that we would continue to invest and support in maternity services, because I think what they've found in other organisations over the last 17 years when they've gone in, that boards have signed up and invested, and then when people have gone away, some of that money has been stripped out again. So I was quite clear with them that our board is absolutely sighted on maternity and maternity improvements, but I think we do need to clearly minute that we are supportive of the ongoing investment into maternity services.
Thank you, Karen. And can I assume that if there's no comment on that point, people would support Karen's point? Janet, would you like to come in, please?
Sorry, I'm absolutely supportive of what you're saying, Karen, and concur a meeting with Donna Ockerton the other day, who was praising those institutions where the board was close to maternity services and where boards listen to their staff. And I know your letter, as well as listen to people who use the service, and we know about the relationship with maternity voices. So keeping maternity close to the board and that relationship for positive reasons, not because of the past reasons, I definitely encourage that close governance.
Thank you, Janet. That's a point well made, and actually it's interesting if Donna Ockendon's noting that as well, that she's supportive of that sort of relationship. So great stuff. Okay, shall I just check with colleagues around the virtual table then? Did anybody have any comments, queries or final thoughts on our maternity services update? Is there anything further to be said? Janet, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, sorry, just to add, just to, it's around staffing again, and because it's a national challenge, so of course it's a local challenge, and congratulations on appointing the 22 that will arrive in due course. But I also noted, you've got a number on maternity leave, so there's a real pressure cooker going on in staffing. And those new people coming, of course, have had a very disruptive programme. And whilst they'll have a preceptorship as normal, I'm wondering about your view of whether there's an enhanced need for preceptorship for all healthcare students that have had a very disruptive programme. This just happens to be maternity. Just your
Janet,
on that.
So I'm sorry to ask the lay question here, but how are you defining preceptorship? What do you mean by that?
So I'm talking about when midwives are in their first year, for example. The recommendation from a number of bodies is NMC in particular, that there is a robust preceptorship, so they're supported into role. So we don't assume that they're competent, but they're not necessarily confident. And when you've had a disrupted 3 years due to a pandemic, we know a number of newly qualified midwives and other healthcare professionals have had a disruptive programme. They are not like their counterparts that qualified before across the whole sector. It's not just the midwives.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Janet. Yeah. And Karen, please do come back. Yeah, great.
Yeah, really good point, and well recognised and well discussed. So as part of our Nursing and Midwifery Leadership Councils, Karen Stansfield from Bradford University attends the Nursing and Leadership Midwifery Council. There are people from the university on each of the other sub-councils. And this is one of the things that we have been discussing and keeping very close to it, because there's a number of things. So the reason we've suddenly seen not all of the students qualifying is because there's been issues with practice hours. And I think that is related again back to the pandemic as well. So when they've calculated practice hours, and it's impacted across the board, so not just in midwifery, in nursing as well. And that's just become apparent this week, really. Now, what we have said is that we will look at extended periods of preceptorship. We will we've relaunched something that we call our ACORN scheme that we do in nursing, which is based on the theory that you're an acorn and we water you and nurture and you grow. So newly qualified nurses will go into the ACORN scheme. From a midwifery point of view, it's very different, of course, because of that first year, that transitional period. But again, making sure we have regular forums with them, and not having expectations as we would have had in the past. And we've had a bit of a warm up to that, because what's been evident is that students that have been in their third year, where you would have expected them to have a lot of experience under their belt, we are seeing students that have not got that same level of experience. And in fact, I met some nursing students who hadn't had a placement on an acute ward until one of their final placements in the third year. So we've already started to be mindful of it over the last 12 months and preparing for that. But we're quite willing to extend preceptorship and things if we have to.
Thank you, Karen. Janet, I assume that sounds reasonable. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're happy with that? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And Ray, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Max. So I was going to just touch on this actually when I present the self-assessment return for Health Education England, but just to talk about the preceptorship programme that we do have. So, you know, we do have a 12-month programme that covers all sorts of things. So, you know, transition shock and coping strategies, resilience and well-being, service improvement, managing risk, leadership and management. So it covers lots of different areas. And there's been a real significant reliance on that, and it assumed ever more importance because, you know, as Karen said, across all healthcare sectors actually, and it applies to AHPs, doctors, as well as nurses and midwives, we've seen new starters really struggling, and that's a mixture of, you know, the well-being that's been affected. We've seen unprecedented levels of people identified as having mental health challenges, for example. It's because of the experience that they've had or failed to get the full experience that they would normally have, and about the disruption of training, as has been mentioned. So I think this programme is there. It's run by our education department. They have study days in Field House, and, you know, it's something that we can and will extend because there's never been more need for it than there is currently.
Thank you very much, Ray. That's extremely helpful detail. Thanks. Okay, so in the absence of any further questions or comments, a great discussion as ever, of course, and we're content to note the reports and the recommendation within the cover paper. Sarah, thank you for what you and your team are doing, and I realised there was a difficult briefing to do today regarding the pattern of stillbirths that was seen in August. We're grateful for the detail, and I hope the team are investigating and learning and applying any change where appropriate. So, yeah, thank you. You go with the support of the board. I don't think there's any further comment. I think that's right. So, yeah, Sarah, thank you very much for joining us. And I'm sorry you kept waiting.
No problem. Thanks, Max. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thanks, everybody. That's really helpful. And Karen, on the last item on quality and patient safety, shall I just ask is there anything in relation to the COVID vaccination programme that you'd wish to bring to our attention, please?
I will keep it short and sweet. So the autumn booster programme has started. The evergreen offer is still there. So if anybody wants the first, second, third, 58th booster, that's fine as well. We have done round about 15,000 vaccines in the first couple of weeks. Main points to note are the majority of the vaccines will be delivered via primary PCNs and GPs and community pharmacists. The big mass vaccination sites that we had previously, the Jacorswell site has been decommissioned. That has moved to some premises at St Luke's, where we can offer evening, weekend and pop-up services and vaccinations for children from there. Airedale Hospital similarly has a community vaccination centre as well. From a staff point of view, we start our staff campaign next week. The reason for it starting next week is that we wanted to have both COVID and flu vaccine on site so we could co-administer wherever possible. The media campaign that will be going out to the people of Bradford and wider has been delayed somewhat because of Perda and the unfortunate passing of the Queen, but there is comms and a comms plan ready to start and go out, and our first big push is going to be for pregnant ladies and pushing immunisations for that group.
Thank you very much, Karen. That's extremely helpful. Thanks. And in the absence of any questions regarding that, we are suitably briefed. We know what's happening. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for your continued work on that indeed, Karen. That's great. Okay, that closes quality and patient safety matters. I'm assuming Karen has, of course, and I'm assuming that Ray, who has indeed come in, would have brought to our attention anything further that arose during the discussions there. So happy to move on from that. That's great. So we've got people, partnerships, audit and assurance, and some governance matters to do. We're working to try and get as close to 2:15 as we can. I'm conscious we have a guest who's just joined us now in the shape of Graham Holmes, our IG manager. And so I'm just going to ask you all, as a test here, would you kindly just skip to item 26? This is just a matter to note, and we have had the paper, of course, but this is the Annual Data Protection Officer Information Governance Report. Item 26, colleagues will have read it. We're being asked to receive and note it and be satisfied that the DPO role, Data Protection Officer role, is being effectively planned and discharged to provide the Board of Directors with the appropriate information and assurances regarding compliance with GDPR and Data Protection Act. Graham, thank you very much for joining us. In the spirit of not having you having to put up with a load of other board matters while you wait for your point, I brought you in now, and I'll turn to you and ask if there's anything you would wish to emphasise to directors regarding this report, which, as I say, we will have read.
Just a couple of points, if I may.
Of course.
Some plus points regarding the Data Security Protection Toolkit, just to note that we did really well on that again this year and got a favourable internal audit report on that. Despite it being really challenging, particularly on the audit, because they're quite intense, the audits nowadays for the protection toolkit, and there was some frustrations from the IT department because they'd previously had an audit which asked a lot of the same questions about 2 weeks before, so a bit of challenging there. To mention also training, I think the wider staff in the trust deserve a bit of applause for getting over 90%, given we were just coming out of a pandemic and chasing backlogs of patient care and what have you. So to get over 91%, it's slightly short of what the toolkit actually asked for, but I still think it's really good under the circumstances. And my particular favourite on this year's report is we had no reportable incidents in last year's. We did have incidents, but none of them had to go outside of what the work we were doing here to investigate them. So none went to the ICO last year. And incidents overall were down by 28% last year, reported ones to us. And whilst the lesser breaches are still occurring, the fact that the people are reporting these shows good awareness and vigilance of the staff within the trust. So that makes us happy too. So they're the main points I wanted to pull out.
Perfect.
A bit of pat on the back for some staff. So if anyone got any questions on the paper, then I'll try my best to answer.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah. So again, as I say, colleagues have read the report again. So I'll just check with director colleagues whether there was anything arose that they would wish to just query, question, comment, etc. So was there anything for us to note, please, on the Annual Data Protection Officer's Information Governance Report, for which we're grateful and pleased to note, actually. I don't think there's any questions or comments. Thank you for pointing the three things out to us as well, Graham, the points of emphasis. That was very helpful. And we can let you go.
Okay, short and sweet. Thanks very much.
Sweet. I think, yeah, all directors have read it, had the chance. No comment. It's great. Yeah. Thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
And you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Yeah. Oh, good. That's pleasing, colleagues, that we're happy enough with what we've seen there. Thank you. Shall we turn now to Karen then, please? And we're into our people section. And we'll just ask Karen to bring to our attention anything from the work of the People Academy that she would wish to. I do recognise, I think John chaired the last one, but Karen, of course, would normally sit in the chair for people. So with you, Karen, please.
Thanks, Max. I think John has joined. I'm not sure whether he wants to do the summary or not. Happy to do it anyway.
I think it's with you, Karen, actually. I think John was hoping you would.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just know he's dialed in now. So
if you could, Karen, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
No problem. So a really packed agenda. I'll summarise as quickly as I possibly can. There was a Health and Safety Committee terms of reference that was approved through the Academy. Workforce race equality standards, there was quite a focus on that. And there was an overall belonging update that focused on that RES Innovation Fund, a fund that was developed back in 2019, and it was aimed at supporting NHS trusts to develop innovative programmes to improve the lives of people with disabilities and to raise the profile of disability as well. And the trust was very successful and received £15,000 in funding and produced a really moving video sharing the stories of 6 of our colleagues who live with a disability or who are associated with a disability. And they shared their personal experiences and how they've been supported by the Trust. The video is going to be showcased across the Trust, probably already has been. And I was lucky enough to see the video after the Academy, and it was really powerful. It left me speechless, actually, and it made me feel really, really privileged to work with such a bunch of inspiring and caring people and such an inspiring organisation. I'm not sure whether many of you have seen it yet, but it's something that I would absolutely advocate. It was just brilliant. Karen,
can I just jump in and say I completely agree with you, and I saw it simply because somebody had sent it to me individually. Can I suggest that we pick up an action there, that we do circulate a copy of the link? Because you're absolutely right. We should all see that. It's brilliant. Thank you, Karen.
It really touched on the Trust values and inclusive culture, and it was absolutely fantastic. There was also a deep dive on the RES data that we submitted in March, and that data, if you remember, reported that white people were twice as likely to access non-mandatory training and development than those from ethnic minority backgrounds. And there was a deep dive that took place in the Academy, and that showed that there were no records available of people being denied any courses, and that there will be extra effort put into increased communication and break down any barriers to that. And there is now a targeted approach to engage and encourage people from all backgrounds, particularly ethnic minority backgrounds, to apply for that non-mandatory training as well. There was an update on looking after our people. There was a People Promise Exemplar update focused on the improvement programme's impact on staff retention. And again, if you recall, the Trust's been selected as one of 23 exemplar sites across the country to help determine whether the People Promise will become a national initiative. There was feedback sought from stakeholders across the Trust, and data has been reviewed to identify areas for improvement in relation to retention, but also across the whole employee life cycle, from onboarding through to exit. And there'll be a focus as well on developing a financial wellbeing support package for colleagues that require it, a flexible working toolkit, a local listening strategy, and a review of the People Awards process, including introducing milestones, different milestones around service, as well as a refresh of the planning for retirement information as well. So lots of work going on there. The purpose of the workforce group and workforce growth and transformation subgroup has been refreshed as well, and it was identified that there were several areas within education and workforce that didn't link into the People Academy, and that has now been addressed. And there was a discussion around the Messenger review as well, leadership for a collaborative and inclusive future, and highlights of that report were shared to the Academy following the review of leadership and management in the health and social care sector, as commissioned by the Secretary of State. Key themes found that if culture could be improved through better leadership, then that would be the best route for improving productivity and patient care overall. And there were several recommendations included in that report as well, around targeted interventions at entry level and mid-career level for managers to promote collaborative leadership and common organisational values. There was a need for consistent and unified national system for appraisals as well, and inclusive leadership being embedded as the responsibility of all leaders. Dashboard wise, there was a small increase month on month against non-medical appraisal rates, and that is and remains a priority for the Trust. a slight increase in staff turnover to 13.2%, up from June's 13.08%, and everybody's closely monitoring that. And then rolling 12-month sickness absence rate at 7.2%, increases seen across the trust, and obviously it links back to the COVID issues that we've been experiencing. The high-level operational risks were discussed and are noted in the report. I won't go through them, but the Academy took assurance that all of those risks were being mitigated and were happy with the plans that were in place. There was a summary of the Freedom to Speak Up quarterly report as well. There has been a title change, so the Guardians are now ambassadors, except for Sue Franklin, who remains our Guardian overall. There are now 17 ambassadors throughout the Trust, and in the Q1 report for 22-23, there were 16 concerns raised. 3 only were anonymous, which is great news. It felt people really could feel free to speak up. Most common reasons relate to civility, and obviously that highlights the importance of the Civility in the Workplace initiative. 6 concerns from Nursing and Midwifery, and thankfully nobody reported they'd suffered any detriment for speaking up, which again is great news, and you know, people do feel really safe to speak up. And then there was an announcement about the pay awards, so the increase of $1,400 per year of staff on the Agenda for Change contract, 4.5% increase for doctors. But it was noted that there is some dissatisfaction from various trade unions and professional bodies, and they were now considering next steps. But I'll leave it there, happy to answer any questions.
That's great, Karen. Thank you very much indeed. And I love the 4 items of positive assurance, learning and improvement at the end there as well. So, and I know I'm spending the whole board meeting complimenting our colleague Katie, but obviously it's an extremely well prepared authored report for the attention of the chair. So again, well done, Katie. A terrific job helping board function properly. May I ask colleagues whether there was anything that's arisen in the work of the People Academy that they would wish to query, discuss, ask about? Quite content. Great briefing from Karen. Yeah, that's smashing. Okay, we'll take that as noted, and thank you, Karen, for the succinct briefing and presentation there. We have a standing item always of looking after our people. Fahim, it's just an opportunity, should you wish, to bring to our attention any particular initiatives that we're trying to undertake. It may well be that you feel that we've been appropriately briefed through global emails, etc. But the floor is with you should you wish to bring our attention to anything we're trying to do to support our staff.
Thanks, Max. I won't repeat anything Karen's already highlighted as part of a summary, but just to sort of highlight that we have got the flu campaign due to be launched next week. So that's in tandem with the COVID vaccine, which Karen's touched upon before earlier. So we are launching that next week. So that will be hopefully to keep our colleagues safe from catching the flu virus this year. That's due to launch next week, and that's and I think following that, the other sort of key highlight for us is that we've got the staff survey, which is also due to be launched, and that's really useful survey that gives us annual data around how our staff are feeling, and it gives us benchmark data against peer organisations and nationally, and that's really useful. And that's being launched next week. We are working on that, so you will likely see comms, etc. that we are promoting, and in Mel's some of Mel's briefings as well. So I think other than that, there's nothing else. I think in terms of Thrive, one final thing around Thrive is that we are focusing on financial well-being for our staff, and that's our key focus at the moment. Good. And as part of that, we are ensuring our staff have all the tools and information, etc. In terms of given the current cost of living crisis, so that they have the information. So we're doing things like webinars for understanding, things like APR, sort of what does credit ratings mean, etc. So just really some really practical things for staff to be able to utilised. So that's our current focus from a staff, from a looking after our staff perspective. So I think that's it.
No, that's extremely helpful, Fane. Thank you very much indeed. Important things: flu campaign, the staff survey, work on Thrive. That's great. Thank you. I'll just check whether is there anything in relation to our looking after our people. I mean, I think it has been actually central to many of the discussions we've had today anyway, but it's an opportunity, of course, to either to steer or invite Fane to focus on something or to query anything that we may be doing. And again, I think in the absence of any questions, Fane, that's extremely useful. Thank you. Thanks for your focus there. And I don't think there's any questions about that. So we note the updates. Thank you very much. Mel, I've noted your comment in the chat. Thank you. There's nothing particularly to brief Director colleagues on from the Strategic Equality and Diversity Council, given that there was no meeting prior to the, there's been no meeting since the last board meeting. And again, hopefully colleagues would agree with me that much of our discussions today have actually focused on equality and diversity, and it's central to much of the thinking we're doing. So unless Mel wishes to come in, I'll assume that we can presume that the council will be meeting very soon and obviously continuing with their own significant work. So, and that seems to be the case. That's great. Thank you very much. And then we're just asked to note, again, the papers have been circulated with us, but the positive findings and indeed some of the challenges that arise from Health Education England's self-assessment return. Ray, should I pass the mic to you, please, and ask whether there's anything you wish to focus on for directors, please?
Yeah, thanks, Max. I'll keep it very brief, but happy to take any questions. So this is a yearly process, and it's a self-assessment process as required by the Education Quality Strategy, which was updated last year. We report against 6 domains, which are listed in the paper, and it's good that we're able to provide real positive self-assessment report on to Health Education England. We've identified, as requested by HEE, 3 successes and or 3 particular successes, of which there have been many, and 3 particular challenges. The successes are around accreditation for simulated practice, an increase in learner capacity over the past year, and actually we were recognised for a national award from HEE just in July about innovative ways of providing resilience to our trainees from pandemic recovery. And we've got a further actually £100,000 just to spend on improved education offerings as a part of that COVID recovery for this year as well. So that's good news arising from that. And the challenges, unsurprisingly, have largely arisen from the COVID pandemic. So as we already discussed, and I won't go through again, the impact on learners in both in medical and nursing and AHP and every quarter, in fact, has been significant. We've seen really unprecedented levels of new doctors coming to us who have been identified as having mental health challenges, a significant proportion actually. Of course, the pandemic has also impacted on the number of staff we have. We know that very well. And of course, that's high on our risk register. Of course, that does impact on the ability to deliver training. And the impact again on the learning and the need for the preceptorship that we've already talked about because of the disruption in training. So those are the 3 challenges that were identified. So a real positive return. I think the education department has stood up incredibly well over the time of the pandemic, and is really getting back on to a strong track again. So happy to take any questions, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ray. That self-assessment will be submitted at the end of this month, and we're asked to note the positive findings and some of those challenges, yeah, which are outlined in the paper. Thank you very much, Ray. So again, I'll just pause a second and see if there's anything wishes to be raised. Mel, please do come in, yeah.
Thank you. That's all. That's really good, positive news. I just wondered, and I can't see it. I've had a little look and I've read it twice. the chief registrar, the appointment of the chief registrar, Ray, I think is another really positive step, isn't it? I've met with Jess, and you know, a lot of her focus is around a discrete piece of work we can do to support and galvanise the relationship between senior management team and execs and juniors, etc. Does it feature, or if it doesn't, could we? Is it? I mean, in the right ballpark?
So it's not included in this paper, Mel, but and the self-assessment is 40 pages long. So I'll check that specific detail that it's in there. But I think it's I met with Jess as well yesterday, and she is absolutely excellent. She's really inspiring, actually, as a trainee, and came with lots of really good ideas about how she can improve lots of things in the trust and how we can work with her to achieve that. So that's a really good point, actually, and I'll check that is actually embedded in there somewhere.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thanks, Mel. That's great. Yeah, we'll leave that to raise attention and decision following review of the document. So thank you. Thanks for that, Mel. Any further comments? No. Are we content to note? And I think we are. Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you very much, Ray. Very positive, actually, isn't it? That's excellent. Okay, so taking a moment now, we're just going to have a pause and think about partnership dashboard, and we'll then turn to Barry for audit committee matters. So, John, again, throughout the entire board meeting, haven't we? We've talked a lot about partnerships and the way we work in a system, but I'll turn to you and ask whether there's anything you would wish to emphasise with us, please.
Yeah, thanks, Max. You've hit the nail on the head. As always, I think throughout the meeting we talk a lot about partnerships. Mel's update, your update. Paul talked in the digital space about some of the collaborative work we're doing with the university. Mel mentioned the reducing inequalities alliance that took place yesterday, which is, you know, inextricably linked to our work as an anchor institution. Inequalities and anchor institution, they're two sides of the same coin. There's a lot of work going on at the place in terms of the governance of the Bradford Districts and Craven Health and Care Partnership, and then resetting the programmes of activity and being clear about who leads on what. So lots going on there. And then in terms of our partnership across West Yorkshire, obviously we're getting more and more familiar with the Integrated Care Board and how that works and how that's absorbed CCG responsibilities. So perhaps it's just worth a mention that we recently had a timeout for the leadership of WIAT organisations. So that's the Federation of Acute Trusts. And it was a really interesting discussion. We covered lots of ground, including kind of shared approaches to clinical problems, you know, operational delivery. And I think it's just a reminder that although the ICB is new and exciting and absorbing a lot of our interests, we do still have a very real connection with the other acute hospitals. And operationally, some of the ways in which we tackle big problems will be working as 5 acutes, not just as, you know, kind of a place with other places. We can do both things in parallel. That's not a contradiction. They're actually complementary. So lots of partnership activity going on. Don't need to say any more about it at the moment unless anybody has any specific questions.
Thanks very much, John. And if I might endorse your point there, the ICB promotes and celebrates provider collaboratives, doesn't it? So I'm pleased that we're a part of that and delighted to hear of your review work there. Thank you. Julie, shall I bring you in, please?
Yeah, I'm interested in, as a partnership now, how the staff who were CCG staff feel. So I don't know how many of them there are now, but I would guess there's at least 100. So how are they feeling to be part of the partnership? Because their role has very much changed from kind of being part of a commissioning organisation to being part of very much a partnership approach. And I'm just wondering how that's going. And I know that's a difficult question to answer, but I just wondered how it was feeling.
That's why I'm going to invite Mel to answer it.
Okay.
The hard one. You get the hard one, Mel. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Mel. Please do come in. Yeah.
So I think it's going well, Julie, so far, because what we've been trying to do is almost ban the commissioning word in a sense,
Yeah.
because it kind of pulls us back to a place, and it also pulls us back to a function that hasn't actually existed well before the dissolution of the CCG in the same way. I mean, the vestiges of the commissioning, the old regime of commissioning, pertains largely to primary care and some council interactions. Everything else has become much more of using the commissioning skills to plan and to use that planning expertise in the transformation space. So now that we've got our 5 big strategic objectives, what we're doing is taking it's almost like we're not tuping people, but we're almost saying, where do they spend 80% of the time? You know, where was the people and where are the people that used to do mental health commissioning? Because that expertise now needs to be vested in that mental health, learning disabilities and neurodiversity priority. Where were the people who did children's commissioning? Because they now need to sit under the leadership of Therese as the Partnership Leadership Exec sponsor, Mark Hindmarsh, who's now the Transformation Director, and then they need to be working in whatever theme it is that we decide is the best fit for them and where they can add most value. So much like a lot of our own team here at BHFT, I've got a foot in both camps. You know, they're working in some place-based stuff as well as and contributing to that as well as their day job here. That's how it's going to kind of emerge for the CCG. There are certain functions that are still very CCG-esque, if you like, because their access of reporting is up to the ICB. But everything else, you know, the vast majority really becomes the partnership resource. And I was sat in a children's improvement board next to one of the information team from the old CCG, and not once in any of that was any mention of commissioning CCG. It was all, I work for the partnership. I facilitate this in the partnership, and it was really good to hear.
And that's really good, because I see that kind of opportunity as being, it's an opportunity to use those people to do something different. I suppose the challenge is making them feel part of it when they very much belong to an organisation. It's harder to belong to a partnership. It shouldn't be, but it is.
Do you know, one of the biggest things that's most difficult to do though at the moment is trying to cultivate a feeling of that sense of belonging to something else when so many people are working from home. So, you know, I can go into ScoreX House, which I try to do at every opportunity, to kind of be there and do that visible leadership like I do here. And nobody's there.
No, thank you.
It's quite hard. Yeah, but you know, it's going okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mel. Julie, I assume that was helpful. Thank you. Thanks very much, Mel. Thank you, John, for the briefing. I'll pause for a moment and see if there was anything further that anybody wants to check, but I think it's been steeped in everything we've discussed today, hasn't it? Our role in a wider position, wider system. So thanks everybody. That's great. Thank you, John. Let's turn to well, Barry often has kind of the end things, doesn't he, that in terms of his audit role, a very important audit role. But Barry, it's don't rush, and it's an opportunity for you, please, to bring to our attention anything you wish from the Chair's report from July, and indeed to bring to our attention the revised terms of reference. So Barry, the microphone's with you.
Okay, thanks, Max. First of all, the report to the board in respect to the Audit Committee meeting on the 26th of July. A relatively short report by my normal standards, but I think that belies the fact that we had a lot of Audit Committee activity in May and June. And in fact, we've agreed that next year we'll run what has been the July meeting in September to create a bit more meat and move forward on that basis. The report is there. I don't wish to add any additional comments, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Barry. So again, we'll just take a pause in a moment. colleagues hopefully have had the chance to read through that, and were there any queries that arose from it, or are we content to note Barry's tabling of his report? And Barry, I don't think anything arises from it, so that's great. And I hope nobody feels rushed. If there are things to query, check, please do. We're not doing ridiculously for time. I realise we're at time, but no, that's great. Okay, thank you, Barry. Yeah, and I'll turn to you for item B then. Yeah. Right.
In terms of the terms of reference, you will see there on page 2 in track changes an additional comment, an additional stipulation clarifying the role of the audit committee in reviewing, challenging and assessing the risk management systems and processes within the trust. When the academies were first founded, I think there were concerns, certainly I had them, I know John, Laura and possibly others had, as to, well, are the audit committee going to be reporting on assurance at every meeting and the academy is doing exactly the same thing? The answer is no. What is proposed here is that the audit committee will look at the mechanics, will look at the systems and processes from time to time, and then leave executive management and the academies to use those systems and processes on a more frequent basis to provide assurance to the board. Yes. And this additional paragraph in the terms of reference is designed to stipulate and put that in place. So that amendment has been considered by the audit committee. It's been approved, and the view of the audit committee was to put this amended terms of reference to the board for board approval.
Thank you very much indeed, Barry. So again, just a pause and an opportunity for any directors who might just want to either query that or ask further detail. If not, this is a request for approval, and so I'm going to be assuming that we can all approve that additional paragraph. The committee will review, challenge and assess the adequacy and effectiveness of the Trust's risk management systems and processes, including this risk management strategy, and provide assurance to the board in that respect. And that appears to have the full support of all directors, Barry. Thank you for summarising that, and I'm going to assume complete approval, and there is indeed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Barry. That's great. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so we'll come to item 23 now. What I'm going to suggest is let's take a moment on board assurance framework and high-level operational risks. We've just got some governance matters to deal with then, but let's just have a 5-minute break before we come in and deal with the governance matters. And I don't want things to feel rushed. So I know we're at 15:15 now. We are, of course, going into a closed meeting later as well. So let's just reflect on board assurance framework and high-level operational risks, and then we'll 4 governance matters, which are to note, but do contain some significant detail. So we'll take a very, very short break and come back and refresh to do those before then getting into closed business. Okay, so John, may I turn to you, please, and just ask whether what would you want to bring to our attention regarding our framework and those high-level operational risks, please?
Yeah, thanks, Max. So we can largely take the BAF and high-level risks paper as read. It's been circulated. You've all had a chance to look at it. I think, given its significance, I just want to, for the record, state that this is the update of the BAF as at a point in August, which is in the midpoint of Q2. So it wasn't discussed at academies because they didn't sit in August, but it did go through the executive team, and the BAF has not changed a lot from its previous iteration the month before. That's not a surprise. The nature of the BAF is such that the risks that it records, the strategic risks, are enduring, are strategic. There are 2 which have moved, so the vast majority haven't. There are 2 which have moved. One of them relates to COVID risk 2B2 and shows a reduced risk score from 20 to 16, which I think is consistent with some of the updates we've had earlier in this meeting about the general direction of travel and the management of the pandemic. And 4.2, which is about research funding, has gone down from a 9 to a 6, again reflective of 2 significant grant awards that have been made. So the BAF is where I would expect it to be. It's been fully updated and vetted by the executive team, but it didn't go through academies. The overall position is one of steady state. We're in the middle of Q2. None of the majority of risk ratings haven't changed. So I'll move on to the high level risk register, where you get both a summary of all of the high level open risks, and you get the movement log, which again has been vetted by the executive team. The summary is there of the discussion that the executive team had. There was nothing that the executive team felt ought to be escalated to this group. There was one risk which we agreed could have a reduced score because the staffing in the neonatal intensive care unit had improved. So that risk had been well mitigated and the score had come down. And there were 3 risks at a point in August which were just past their review date. So they've subsequently been addressed, but they're recorded as past their review date. So the thing I wanted to flag for us, Max, in terms of a substantive item to discuss, I am conscious of time, but I think this is important, is Barry drew to our attention a concern of his that there were risks which came to the Quality and Patient Safety Academy, which had been on the risk register for some time, which were still open, which in the course of being open had passed their original target date for completion, and that target dates had therefore been extended, which, well, you might say that's good governance. We shouldn't be miles past the target date without doing something. But in some cases, the risk had even increased in score. So not only had the risk not been fully mitigated by the target date, but actually it had gone in the opposite direction, the risk had worsened. And I think the question, I don't want to paraphrase him too much, but the question is, and what are we doing about that? What's our assurance? What's our level of confidence that actually these risks are being actively managed? If they haven't been successfully mitigated, well, what do we do? Do we just kick the can down the road? Do we keep extending the target date or what? And I thought rather than me sort of try and put my spin on that, a couple of the risks which I know are the ones Barry was thinking about, it might be worth hearing from the relevant exec just to give you some insight into the management of those risks and so on. Now, that doesn't neatly answer the bigger question about what do we do when there are these risks which endure but are still appropriate to consider. But I just wanted to illustrate them, and I think the first one was Ray about the Child Development Service, and the second one was Karen about children's community services. If we could just have a quick word from them, that might help illustrate. But I can see Barry's got his hand up already.
No, it's a great idea, John. And the very fact, actually, we just pause and think about this is entirely sensible. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for picking that up. Barry, before we hear from exec colleagues, was there something else you wanted to add, please?
Yeah, I just want to add to and agree with John in his comments there. You know, it is part of business, it is part of running the hospital that sometimes risks will accelerate rather than decline. My challenge was to ask whether in academy or in board or at an executive committee, executive management meeting, these had been scrutinised, and we were satisfied that all that could be done was being done, and that we were aiming for better mitigation of these risks on a reasonable, in terms of today's circumstances rather than 18 months ago. We're moving forward as quickly as we can to resolve these issues.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Thank you, Barry. Yeah. So shall we turn to Ray in the first place then? Yeah, thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, John. I think it's a point really well made, actually. I think when you see the risks as they are and a little bit of a narrative in terms of an update and an extension of the review date, it's very difficult, I think, as a board to get the sense of actually what's going on. Is there actually anything happening with this, or are we just kind of ignoring it and then extending it and extending it? I think it is true of all the risks on there that we're not just extending it and ignoring what's going on. I think it's difficult in a small amount of narrative to capture a lot of the work which is trying to address that risk. Of course, some risks are just not solvable. John's mentioned the Child Development Centre. So just as recently as last week, I met with Helen Jeps and Kate Wildick about that very problem. It's been on the risk register, I think, now for 3 years, or slightly over 3 years, I think. And the risk score now is slightly higher than it was, I think, when it was first added to the risk register. I think it's 15 now, and it might have been 12 initially. And I think that reflects accurately the risk position. The challenge around the Child Development Centre is really around one of demand and capacity. Unsurprisingly, and particularly actually in the times of the pandemic, the numbers of children who would require input and support from the Child Development Centre has gone up significantly. The commissioning for this service was quite historical, and the resource required has never been able to keep pace with the increase in demand in Bradford. It's important to note that the risk score is a snapshot. It's a one moment in time, and probably 3 or 4 weeks ago now, we had some interviews for 3 new Child Development Centre consultants, so experts in neurodisability. We had 3 successful candidates who were all appointed. Sadly, 2 of those candidates gave back word very soon after, disappointingly, and then they went and took jobs in Leeds. One of the candidates has stayed firm to their offer of appointment and will be joining us. If, for example, those 2 candidates hadn't given back word, I think the risk position wouldn't have been as high as it is. So, as I said, the risk score is a snapshot in time, and it varies very much depending on, you know, what has recently happened. So, the Child Development Centre's risk remains there. It isn't possible to get rid of it completely. The fact that it's been on a long time doesn't mean that we should shut it down in any way or ignore it, because it does remain still a risk. The difficulty is the only mitigation really is more staff to meet the ever increasing caseload that we have. We keep trying to recruit those staff, and until we can, in a very, very difficult market out there, it's not going to be possible to close it completely. What we could do, though, and I was thinking about this when I spoke to John earlier, is that rather than just adding a little bit of narrative each time and extending the review date, given that the CDC risk, for example, is now 3 years plus old, it probably needs a refresh and actually a stop and a where are we now, and it might need re-articulating that risk, and it might need, you know, phrasing in a different way, because whilst the risk might be there, the underlying cause of the risk might have altered in that 3 years time. So I think if risks that have been on there for some time, I think it is well worth having a stop and a think about what that risk is in today's money, and then articulating that perhaps differently on the risk register. I think that should probably sort of act as a refresh for all the risks that are there and are long standing.
Thank you, Ray. That feels a really good suggestion. I can see Barry nodding at the idea as well of a re-articulation, perhaps. Yeah. Karen, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah,
Good
I mean,
discussion.
these are really complex risks, and there's no right or wrong answer. So when if I take the staffing risk as an example, we actually closed that down last year, redid the risk assessments and redid it because it had been on since about 2017. So there are some risks that are always going to stay on. With the Child Development Centre, again, it's multifactorial. So, you know, we thought we had a bit of a solution that was new consultants come in. But on top of that, you've also got the risks around children's services at place that I think I discussed at last board when we talked through everything that's happening at place. But just to give you some reassurance, Barry, so we've reset up the children's board internally at BTHFT. I'm the exec lead for that because it links nicely with maternity, with neonatal unit crossing over the two. And this is where we're having very active conversations around these types of issues. And in fact, if you were to go back over exec papers for the last 12 months, you would see this raised and discussed and different ways of looking how to tackle these thorny issues. So I also had a conversation with Helen Jeffs last week where we were talking about the model around consultants within Child Development Centre is quite an old-fashioned one that hasn't really been modernised in a very, very long time. That's the model I'm used to 30 years ago. So looking at how we can do things differently, how we can use advanced practice clinicians, or how we can actually encourage people to come into acute paediatrics with interest within those community things and those safeguarding elements. Because I think whilst Bradford is under the spotlight for all things children, community, non-acute, I think it's probably not looking a great place to come and work at the moment. There's a lot we can do about that to make it more exciting and more attractive to work, but I think it will take time to work through. So please don't take the fact that a risk goes up or down as people not being cited or not on the ball with it. There's a lot of work happening in this area.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Ray. And indeed, Barry, all directors have just approved the idea that the audit committee might take a close look at risk management processes and the management of long-term risks. So, entirely appropriate challenge. Thank you, and thanks, Karen and Ray, for your additional information. John, should I turn back to you and ask was there anything else that arose there you wanted to say? I know Mel wants to come in as well, so shall I bring Mel in first, and then I'll let you have the last word, John. Yeah, Mel, please.
I think we all appreciate it's not the only factor, but the location and the environment in which people work definitely has an impact. You know, Kate's really sort of struggled to get us to be able to make something out of a very poor set of options really around where they are. And so I think we you know, alive to that now, I think we need to look at identifying some alternatives, perhaps, for the location of those teams and a more bespoke offer, and to think about where, out of all our accommodation and that which is or may be available to us, where the biggest synergies would be with that particular service, so that that would also help in the redescribing and redefining the model and its interaction with other parts of the system through the partnership. So I think, you know, we've certainly got some options available to us.
Thank you, Mel. A very, very good point. Thanks. Yeah, great stuff. John, shall I turn back to you and ask if there's anything you want to say in conclusion here?
Yeah, I shan't comment any more on the specifics of child development or, you know, children's community services. Just to say, I think there's an overarching point Barry makes, which is something that I think I hear the audit committee is going to look at, and that is those enduring risks which have been around for a long time and the way in which we continue to track them, and as Ray says, the way we show that we are tracking them, refreshing them if necessary. So I think I'll take something away from this with Laura, just to have that conversation with exec colleagues about, you know, almost to spring clean, we do it anyway, but do we have some trigger, some automatic trigger that says this has been on for 2 years, we will now have a you know, whatever the word is we want to use, I'm not going to say deep dive, but we now have a kind of reset for this risk and ask ourselves, is it still fit for purpose in its current form with its current scoring, etc. I'm not concerned, and I don't think from this conversation I'm sensing a concern that we're sleeping on the job and there are risks which are not being adequately monitored. But it does raise a question about those which have been on for a long time, and whether we need to re-articulate them and think about a different way of working through them. So I think we ought to try and routinise that after our period of time, and we can talk about how exactly that works.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And I like the phrase re-articulation. I like the idea that might encourage, is this still valid? And if so, what's the evidence for it now, rather than 18 months ago, 24 months ago. Barry, was that a helpful discussion? It felt very much so to me. 5 hours into a meeting, it's important stuff.
No, very much so. And you know, I want to stress that I understand the practical and operational difficulties of dealing with these risks. Sometimes they do go in the wrong direction, etc. But you know, looking in on this as a non-executive director, I've got to say, am I being provided with enough persuasion, enough assurance that these risks that do exist, that have a score attached to them, in the round are being progressed and managed in an effective and appropriate manner? And I think the discussion that we've had here helps point to how we can achieve that.
Thank you, Barry. And your comments have clearly been well received. So thanks. And thank you, John. Yeah. John, are you happy that that concludes this matter?
It's perfect for me. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, we're inviting board colleagues to approve the fact that they are assured by the current board assurance framework, and in the spirit of the discussion we've just had on risk management, that we are assured by the level of risk management. So thanks, everybody. That's terrific. Okay. Well, look, as I said, I didn't want to rush through the four final matters. I'm not suggesting that they're necessarily lengthy, but they're important issues. So can I propose just a 5-minute break now for people just to stretch their legs, maybe get a fresh cup of tea? And it's 14:31, so I say 14:36 on my computer is when we come back and consider our 4 final items. I hope people also realise we're only stealing a little, of course, from closed board time, so we still will finish at the time we said we would this afternoon. So 14:36, let's come back and deal with the final 4 governance matters, yeah? Okay, thanks everybody, I'll give you 5 minutes.